And then I'd like you to do File, New, Model here, okay? And we are going to undertake a model that's going to be called SD System Dynamics Diabetes Simple, okay? And I'm going to put a designation on it just because I like to remember where I gave these things. SK 8 2015. No, you can't do that. Okay. Okay. And 8 underbar 2015. You don't have to do that, but it's for me to keep track of where these things came from. Okay. We will try, aspire to release these to all of you. The phalanx of TAs should re-enter the premises. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just did new model, and we've just created this model. And I would like now to go through a step-by-step exercise in putting this model together. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do is to go and put in place a stock. Okay, and we are going to go over here. So when you create a new model, you should see this. Do you see this on the left-hand side? Okay. I'd like you to double-click on main, make sure main is up. Okay. Okay, and now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to click on palette. Palette will provide us with an admirable palette of items that we can add to the model. In this case, this morning we were partaking of this state chart. Here, I'd like to instead go up to the System Dynamics area, okay? And I am going to engage you once again in a buzzing, blooming confusion, as William James remarked about early childhood, okay? And you will be grasping for trying to figure out what the heck's going on, and then I will introduce to you the concepts, which hopefully will kind of help you structure it, so that you actively have questions coming up which will then be answered, rather than passively hearing me drone on about the concepts. So let's drag in a stock, and we will call this normoglycemic. Okay? That means folks who have normal blood sugar levels. Okay, how did I do that? I went and I clicked on System Dynamics and I dragged it in. It was the same basic mechanism we used this morning to recognize, to add a transition. Kurt, are there any bottles of water out there? Or other juices? Okay. Or tea? Okay, the tea would be most welcome. Thank you very, very much. Okay. So normal glycemic, and now I'd like to introduce, ladies and gentlemen, a flow. Okay? We're going to drag, actually, I'm sorry, before we even do that, within the normal glycemic, I'd like to change it to be the initial value we need to specify is 1,000 people. Okay? I clicked on it, went to properties, and I set initial value to be 1,000. Okay? Now we're going to drag in a flow, and this will be called, this flow will be called developing diabetes, okay? Okay. Okay.
Is it your naming convention? So capital.
Oh, thank you.
For states, and then flows are this lowercase for the.
Yeah. So this is a great question. Sorry. So I drag this in. I tend to capitalize stocks, and I tend to put flows in lowercase to distinguish them. You'll notice I'm doing something very strange from your perspectives. Who needs TA help? They stand ready. Here, you notice I put these two words together, developing diabetes, and that's because we cannot put them as separate words with a space between them. Thank you so much. Any logic, or more precisely, what's called Java, will balk. And so we put them together, developing diabetes, all one word. Such is the fate of us building atop of Java. Okay, so developing diabetes. Now, we have to do something else. I'd like you, though, before we do that, to go back to normal glycemic. And you'll notice something has happened. Something has changed. Does anyone notice something that's changed here? From earlier, we put in this 1,000, but there's something that's different. Yeah, it's actually automatically filled in an equation for it. And for those whose calculus is a dim memory, if any memory at all, what this is saying is the rate of change of normal glycemic, how quickly that's going up or down. It's given as minus developing diabetes. In other words, it's going up with a rate that's minus developing diabetes. The bigger this is in terms of people per unit time, the more negative that it'll be changing. So in other words, it'll be coming down. The faster people go out with developing diabetes, the quicker normal glycemic will be decreasing as a stock. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's go to the model as a whole. Go back to, how could I go see where the model as a whole, ladies and gentlemen? How could I set its properties? Could you riddle me that? Back to projects, click on the model as a whole, and let's set the model time units. Seconds would be a bit inconvenient to characterize development of diabetes, would it not? We could do it, but it would be most uncomfortable in terms of some of the time constants. AnyLogic actually provides you a very nice way of sort of saying, well, make this in days, make this in years, but let's set it to something more comfortable. Let's set it to years, shall we not? And so 1 for a time unit will mean 1 year. And that's a yardstick with which we have in some measure of comfort when it comes to like incidence rates for diabetes.
Is it kind of an artificial kind of statement? Is it a year or a second? Is it just for us, basically?
It's for us. It's mathematically...
It's just kind of basically seeing these as equivalent
correct.
sticks.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, I mean, so our time unit that we impose on the model is for our interpretation of the results,
Right.
but we need it to be consistent. So we can't do something like add something that's number of people per day to a number of people per month and expect it to be meaningful. We have to adjust so that it's consistent.
So we just have to be consistent one way or the other. And
Correct.
Use the results.
Yes.
In whatever tick.
That's right. That's right. But it's kind of nice. It labels things in days for you. Actually, more than that, actually, this is a non-trivial point. It actually maintains a calendar, which allows you to ask, is it a holiday? Is it a weekend? And if you want to use that, if you want to have the opening time of your clinic open, 8 o'clock on Monday through Friday and 10 a.m. on Saturdays and 12 noon on Sundays, then you're sure as heck going to want it to know what time unit it is so that it will know it's 7 o'clock, in the morning. Or what, you see what I mean? Yeah. Okay. Great question, though. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you now to set developing diabetes to be 100 here. That means, now remember, if we have a stock, ladies and gentlemen, this stock depicts a number of people. It's depicting the current state of the situation. Stocks depict, they're kind of the nouns, they depict the current situation. The flows are the actions, the flows are where the change is occurring. The stocks describe the current state of the situation, And this stock here is depicting 1,000 people at first. How do you determine stocks and flows? We'll get into this, but one of the things you could do, to which Jeff alluded, is you can imagine freezing the situation. What things could you measure? If you were freezing the situation, you couldn't ask how many people are developing diabetes per week. You're only looking at one instant in time. You could classify how many normal glycemic people there are. Great. That's a meaningful thing. That's a stock. By contrast, developing diabetes is a person per year. Normal glycemic is a count of persons. And so developing diabetes is persons per year, per time unit. So we're saying 100 persons per year. So what do you think would happen if I ran this model? Anyone? Anyone want to venture a guess? This model is runnable. Congratulations. People, pat yourselves on your back. You've created your first AnyLogic model. Runnable. Shall we run it? What do you think will happen? Okay, 10 years everyone will be... Okay, hey, let's go. So I'm running it here. Do you see that? Who needs TA help? Who needs TAs? Stretched out along the back wall, ready to serve. Let's go click on normal glycemic, and we see something rather adverse going on. Look what started at 1,000. What is it now? It's most distressing, is it not? Although some people would argue negative, so negative normal glycemic blood. What's going on? There's no lower bound. There's nothing limiting it. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no balancing loop. There's nothing that's kind of keeping the system from going out of bounds. There's nothing that tells it, the fewer normal glycemic people are, the fewer people are going to get diabetes now. So let's insert that. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our first model, and fail early, fail often. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, let's go back to the palette. Let's now add in a parameter. This will be diabetes incidence rate. Okay? I just dragged this over. This is what's called camel case, because it kind of goes up and down like the humps on a camel. And you notice I've given it a lowercase diabetes incidence rate. Can you folks see that? Okay. Okay, and then, having done that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to drag over a link so that this will depend on diabetes incidence rate. Now the plot thickens. Within system dynamics, we have this sort of mechanism of illustrating what depends on what. We saw that in causal loop diagrams. It's very powerful. Ladies and gentlemen, again, models are not crystal balls. They are learning tools, and they are tools that benefit learning by transparency. The transparency enormously will benefit the learning because it will spread it out among a larger group of people and make it more reliable, quicker to gain insight. And here, transparency of models increase by making sure that if something depends on another quantity, it'll be linked to it. So this is a hint as to what's coming shortly, a harbinger. So now let's draw a similar link. Well, let me ask this. Ladies and gentlemen, surely the rate of people developing diabetes in persons per year has to depend on something else. What does it have to depend on? On what does it have to depend? On the population, the normal glycemic population. I mean, after all, if there's no one normal glycemic, there shouldn't be anyone developing diabetes. Does that not stand to reason? It stands indeed. So ladies and gentlemen, let's go add that. Okay. Okay. So we're going to go drag a link, and lo and behold, it fits like a charm. There we go. So we're going to drag that in. That's going to show developing diabetes needs to depend on the number of normal glycemic people. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, what we were lacking earlier, was it not? Okay, so are people clear why there's a link here? Because this will depend on normal glycemic. If there ain't no one normal glycemic, we ain't going to have anyone developing diabetes. If we have 10 billion people who are normal glycemic, the number of people getting diabetes per year is going to be greater than if we have 2 people that are normal glycemic. Does that make sense? It's got to depend on it. Okay. Now there's some extra theory here. What we're actually illustrating at this moment is what's called a first-order delay, and there's some rich theory behind it associated with memoryless stochastic processes, exponentially distributed resonance time, but I'm not going to go into that here because time doesn't afford it. But if anyone is interested, I would be happy to deliver them a lecture or refer to one online where I speak about these things with some gusto. So if you go to developing diabetes, we are going to replace now this hard-coded constant, ladies and gentlemen, with a formula. And on what will you think this formula will depend? Well, it will depend on those 2 things that are shown as links. And how will it depend on them? Ladies and gentlemen, suppose we had a diabetes incidence rate of 10% per year. And we have 1,000 people at risk who are normal glycemic. 10% chance for each of them per year. How many people are going to be developing diabetes per year on average? $100. Where did that 100 come from? Yeah, the diabetes incidence rate times the number of normal glycemic people, right? In other words, each of those 1,000 has a 0.1 chance of developing. So each one. So on average, this is a Bernoulli. It's a Bernoulli process where each of them has a certain probability of getting it. So it's a binomial draw with probability 0.1, and the number of tries is equal to the number of people. So we are going to associate diabetes incidence rate. This is diabetes incidence rate. Now, I will show you a trick that will spare you much time. So watch well. When I'm typing this out, you can type it out in longhand, what I type, but a faster way is to do the following. Start typing and then press Control Space, and it will fill it out for you. From whence did it know that? Well, it figured out what variables there were, and it found only one. So then I will put times with a star normoglycemic, Control Space. It will fill it out for you. Did that work for you? In the part, what's that?
Does it need to be space between the...
There does not need to be a space. I like to put a space just so it's easy to read.
Okay.
It will ignore space. Okay. Okay. Are people comfortable with that? Who needs EA help? Did you get that autocomplete to work, Control Space? Did it fill that out for you?
Max is a little different.
Oh, yeah, with Max, it's Command, mumble. Oh, Winchell, high priority interrupt. On Max, what's the autocomplete?
It's option and space.
Option space?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Option space. Okay?
She was saying it right the whole time.
Great, yes. Thank you. I didn't have to call the master. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, should we run this now? First of all, I'd like to refer you to something. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, I do this so reflexively I forget to tell people. When you make a modification to a model, press Control S or Command S? Command S on Macs to save? Command S.
You need to set the diabetes incidence rate.
On a Mac, it's Command.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Okay, the final thing which we'll do is go to diabetes incidence rate and set it to 0.1, 0.1. Thank you, Chris. Okay? Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So we set that to, now the next thing I'd like you to do is save it and save early, save often. And then I'd like you to go up to this, which is build model, okay? And press that, and it should say down the lower left, build completed successfully. If it does not, raise your hand, and one of the TAs will deploy. Okay, deploy sector 1, sector 3. Okay, who else needs help? Okay, sector 2 right. Okay, who else needs help? Okay, shall we run it? Run it or not? What do you think will happen now? Riddle me that. Okay, and what does it do until 0? Okay, so let's talk about this, folks. We have characterized the dynamic hypotheses, and we're asking the computer to solve this for us. So one hypothesis would be that this decreases and stops at 0, because after all, at 0, no one's developing diabetes anymore, right?
You almost had it, right?
What does anyone have a competing idea for what it might do?
So now, what's happening is it's used as an objective these numbers.
Okay, so let's suppose we're diagramming here the number of normal glycemic people. So it might go up.
Also, you have, I guess no, you would have normal glycemic.
Sometimes it's hard to see.
Yeah. So actually, normal glycemic, it's an important insight. Normal glycemic can actually only go down because of people leaving then. Okay. Does anyone have a? So is this going to be going top? Yeah.
It's got a curve, yeah.
Okay. So
Asymptote to 0.
okay. So why is it going down faster at first than later?
Because there's more population.
There's more people at risk. So the rate at which, so initially there's 100 people per year, and then after there's only 500 people left, there's maybe only 50 per year going. So can we run it? Run it or not? Okay, run. So let's see what happens. It's a good exercise to think through early on what's going on, and you'll notice that indeed it starts going down quicker at first, and then it's becoming smaller and smaller. But as it's becoming smaller, the rate at which people are leaving is slower. So if we look at this rate of people developing diabetes, for example, and do a similar graph, we find initially that's very high, but then it's going small. Do you see that, Chris?
Normal, I know this is sort of trivial at a
Yep.
deeper level, but integer valued versus continuously valued for nothing for normal value.
Yeah, I was wondering if anyone would ask about that. It's a very good question. And to answer that, I will ask the TAs refresh my cup of tea, if I could.
If you're going to get to it later.
No, that's okay. The TAs are out of the room, it seems. So thank you, Jeff. Apologies. So this is a great question. You'll notice that we have represented the number of people in that stock as a continuous quantity. This is a non-trivial point. And in fact, in another paper on which Cheryl has written and to which I contributed, this turned out to be a key point. It actually made a huge difference if this could go arbitrarily low, or if it effectively, thank you, Kurt, thank you, Jeff, or if it essentially, would go to truly 0 once it was below 1, say. So representing this as a continuous quantity is convenient here. It's convenient, and we could wave our hands and say, well, if it's has a decimal point, it kind of means something about the probability. But the fact is, it can be problematic sometimes. Watch this. It's 27, 25, 24. Let's speed this up a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, you can speed these things up by pressing this. Okay, here it is. And now we have 2, 1, okay. Okay, so about half a person. Okay, kind of their head remaining. Now we're down to about a fingernail, maybe. Okay, so the point is that with these models, we do have, when we're depicting things like this, we're abstracting away from the details of exactly how many people are there. And there are cases where it will matter, and there's many cases where it's fine. But it requires a little bit of judgment. There are cases where you can drag things down arbitrarily. Here, you might think of people as quantized, right? You have 0 person, you have 1 person, you have 2 people. Especially when you're dealing with things that Cheryl does, like people who have drug-resistant gonorrhea. You have difference between 0 and 1 is a pretty major issue for the implications for spread of infection. And yet there are other cases where if this is water in a reservoir, or if this is money available for a program, or if this is quality-adjusted life years being accumulated, having continuous quantities is perfectly fine. There are cases where it can be problematic with people. There's a lot of cases where it's just fine and we find it acceptable. But it is an important issue that we've characterized it as a continuous quantity. Now, if it was stress levels, maybe it's okay. You could have arbitrarily low levels of stress or what have you. You'd have dynamics of stress. Same thing with level of immune system complement for a particular bug. We might be willing to gloss away from it. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've just seen what's called the negative feedback there. Negative feedback goes through this. Let's go diagram this, and I will suggest this for your use. AnyLogic, as well as other system dynamics packages, offer a quite powerful ability to draw causal loop diagrams. And you'll notice if you click on this link, amongst other things, you can set a polarity with this link. So you tell me, folks, as number of normal glycemic people go up, is this a positive or negative link? In other words, as number of normal glycemic people go up, does number of people developing diabetes per year go up or down, all other things being equal, compared to the value it otherwise would have had? So if number of people who are normal glycemic goes from 10 to 1 million, does the number of people developing diabetes go down? Goes up. Number of people per year developing it. Yeah. Now, that means, and I certainly understand, it means they're rushing out ever faster out of the normal glycemic stock. But if we just consider this link, normal glycemic to developing diabetes, that actually is a plus link. And you'll notice there's this plus we can put there. Now, where's the negative link? I said this was a negative link. There's actually a negative feedback here. Where do you think it is? Wherein lies it? Yeah, it's in the flow. So the bigger the level of developing diabetes, all of the things being equal, does normal glycemic population go up or down compared to the value it otherwise would have had? In other words, if we have more people developing diabetes per year, if we have 10 people versus 10,000 people, does that tend to increase normal glycemic compared to the value it would have had otherwise, or decrease it? Decrease it. So there's a negative link going back the other way, which can't be easily shown with AnyLogic's convention, but it's a negative link. So it's a negative feedback there. It tends towards stasis. It tends towards stability. So I'd like to try this, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, question?
I have a question from the qualitative standpoint. How do I know that if you have a normal glycemic, that you're not lower than normal? I mean, if you're lower than normal, you're not going to get diabetes. If you're higher than normal, then you will. So how do I know that? Fair
enough. So we will show in just a minute adding another flow out, and generally that's so. If you want to represent deviations from normal glycemic to a lower level of glycemia, hypoglycemic level or what have you, we could do so with another stock and have a transition to it. And we're going to do something a bit like that in just a minute in the limited time we have available. So, but first, folks, I want to drag in a stock called diabetic, and I want to drag it into the end of this arrow. Okay? and it's going to be called diabetic. Oops, diabetic. And you'll notice when you do that, it underlines this thing, and you can drag it around. When you have something selected and you see something underlined, it means you can drag it around and it will kind of move the label. So you can move these labels to a location of greatest comfort in aesthetic suitability. Okay, so now we have diabetics, and this will initially start 0. So riddle me this, ladies and gentlemen. If I run this model now, what's going to happen to the number of people who are diabetic? Anyone? Okay, how will it increase? Okay, so it'll be going up. Will it go up at the same rate over time?
No, curve.
It'll curve. It'll be most curved. There we go. So it's going up and flattening out, and we could speed up the model and we'll see the flattening in a most pronounced way. Okay, very good, ladies and gentlemen. Next, I would like you to go, and we are going to investigate the ways in which we can have deviations and how a negative feedback leads to stability. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to go to the palette, and I would like to drag in a flow into normal glycemic. Now, I'm exhibiting dysfunctional behavior with respect to this, so I'm going to just drag it in here. I will call this incoming normal glycemic, and I'm going to have to fix it up here by dragging this little blibbit over to here. Okay, and I'm going to drag this down. So I've dragged this in, and I'm going to have people coming into the normal glycemic stock. Okay. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to drag into here, I'm going to put in an incoming rate of 50 people per year. Who needs TA help? A contingent of vigilant TAs stands scanning. Okay, who needs TA help? Okay. Alas, I think there's a negative feedback associated with TA vigilance.
What did you set it at?
This value or TA vigilance? So this value is 50. Yeah. 50. Okay. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to run this model now. What do you think will happen?
So you have an unlimited inflow.
We have an unlimited inflow. We have people, think of them as immigrants coming in. And what do you think is going to happen? Yes? Anyone? Okay, Scott?
I believe it should stabilize, so when the inflows and the outflow are the same,
Good, good. Okay, so let's run this thing. Okay, so let's go look at the number of people who are normal glycemic here. What's going to be going on? It's going to be running. It looks like it's going south in just the way it did before, but something's going to be different. What's going to be different? What's its ultimate value? 500. And look at what the outflow is. What is the outflow at value 500? Reason it through. If this value is 500, what will the outflow be? 500 times 0.1, which will be what? 50. And does anyone remember that number 50? Wherein did we last see this? From whither did that come? Yeah, well, it wasn't so ethereal. We actually put it in very concrete terms. Remember, that's how many people are coming in per unit time. In fact, it labeled there, it stands before us. So ladies and gentlemen, the inflow is equal to the outflow at this rate. We have an equal rate of people coming in and people leaving. And so it is constant. The rate of change is equal to the inflow minus the outflow. 50 minus 50 is going to leave it constant. It's like having a bathtub with an equal rate of water coming in as it's draining out. Now, I'd like to do something, though, radical. I'd like to do something that might excite even the TAs. Unfortunately, they don't seem to be rushing back in the room. Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, having secured this stasis, having secured this equilibrium, I would like now to disturb it and see what happens. Remember, I've told you that negative feedback seeks stability. They seek balance. It's like homeostasis. They seek to bring a system back into balance. I would like you to perturb, in a way that might excite even a TA, this value here. So how do you do that? You click on it, and you click on this little pen. And you write upon that surface 600, and press enter. And I want you to tell me what you think will happen. Suddenly we've perturbed it. We've added an impulse, what economists would call a shock. And what happened?
Can you redo that last step?
Sure, most happily. So I clicked on this. I clicked on this little pen, and I changed it to be 600. I've changed it out of its equilibrium value, and I made it 600. What do you think will happen? Okay, it's going to go back to 500. Why will it go back to 500? This is the key thing. Why will it go back to 500?
The inflow and the outflow are perfectly balanced.
Okay, at 500.
At 500.
But what happens if this is 600? Let's suppose by an act of God we say that will be 600. What happens?
Well, it spikes. Goes up initially.
Okay, so this is high, and then what does that lead to? Increases the outflow from 50 to 60, and what does that do? Now we have an inflow of what?
50.
Still 50, an outflow of 60, and what happens?
Drains.
It drains the stock, and it drains it until what? It's balanced, until the outflow equals the inflow. Ladies and gentlemen, now I'd like you to riddle me something else. And time is a fleeting, but we have a little bit more time for fun that would interest even the TAs. So let's click once again on that little pen, and let's change it to 400. What do you think will happen now?
It will go
It's
up.
going to go down initially, and then it'll go back up to 500.
It will go back up. And why will it go back up to 500?
Fewer people going up.
There's fewer people going out than are coming in. The rate of people developing diabetes is less than the rate of arrivals, and therefore it will go back to equilibrium. It's restored to equilibrium. Now, all of this is a little bit obscure, but I am aiming a little bit obscure because we're looking at it with these small graphs which sort of fill in nasty ways. I have a subversive purpose here. I'm leading you in a subversive direction with little of you knowing it, but I will reveal it now, okay, in a way that may even excite the TAs. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am teaching you how to work with any logic over time here in ways that will cut across all of the different traditions. So what we will do now is we're going to add a graph in, to graph that out in a full, dignified form. Shall we not?
Yes.
Shall. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, let's go down to the analysis area and let us drag into this very model a time plot. And we will put it above the model, okay? Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, now we have a time plot above the model. And we will call this plot stocks of this. So we're going to plot out the values of the stocks. Is that okay? Do people feel okay with that? Okay. So what did I do? I went down to the Analysis tab here. I went down to Analysis, and I clicked on Time Plot, and I dragged it over. Do you see that? Do folks see that? Okay. Having done that, ladies and gentlemen, we will need to go to this Data area, and we will need to add in a data item. And from that name, what will that data item be? What do you think that data item will be? Yes, number of normal glycemic and number of diabetics. So we're going to press the plus to add this data item in, selecting the chart. We'll press the plus, and we will give it a title of normal glycemic. This title could have spaces in it. It could have all sorts of fancy things in it, but the value for it will be what? Normal glycemic. Remember, autocomplete is your friend. Okay? And next, for those following along, the TAs, who needs TA help? The TAs stand ready. Reward their vigilance. Okay? Okay, TAs, prepare for deployment. Okay, next, ladies and gentlemen, let's add another one for normal glycemic. For diabetic. Let's add for diabetic as the next one. Diabetic. And what value will we put in there? Diabetic, and we'll do autocomplete and fill her out. Okay. Okay, now we're not done yet. AnyLogic's charts are a finicky bunch, and you need to fiddle with them just a little bit so that they don't do things that are annoying. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you scroll down here, first of all, be sure, okay, yeah, it's updated every 1 year. That's good. If you go change your model time later, it may change it to seconds initially. Okay, and then display up to make it 10,000 samples. I want to see all the recent samples. Okay, and then, ladies and gentlemen, for the scale of the chart, make the time window 100, make it a time window 1,000. How did I do that? I expanded scale to make a time window 1,000. In other words, display up to 10,000 and time window 1,000. Okay? Are people comfortable with that? Comfortable? Okay, the TAs stand ready. Okay? Okay? Great. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember, build early, build often. Up at this place here. Save your model and build it. This is your very first model. Treat it as a firstborn child. Okay? Okay. So, build the model, and now let's run it. Okay? What should we see? Scroll up. Scroll up here. What do we see? What's happening there? Oh! What's going on? What's going on? Well, people are coming in. What's stabilized here? Do you see that? Who needs TA help? TAs, prepare to spring into action. Sector 1. Sector 2. Okay, summon the cavalry. Okay, who else needs TA help? Okay, TA help? Okay, TAs? The cavalry has arrived. Briasri has entered the structure. Okay, that's great. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now I would like you to stop it again. Let's just start it again. Slow it down a bit. Slow it down so that time is passing slowly. And let's go up and see this. And what we're going to do is we'll let it run for a couple of years here. It's going down. Okay, TAs, sector 1. Okay, TA help needed. This is good exercise for some of the TAs. Okay, moderate to vigorous physical activity is increasing. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we're running it. Now let's perturb it. Let's increase number of normal glycemics up to 600. All right, 600 here. What's going to happen? Well, you'll notice it's being brought back into stability. It's being brought back to its value. Bump it up to 2,000. Okay, 2,000. What do you think is going to happen? It's coming back down. Bump it down, ladies and gentlemen, bump it down to 0. What do you think is going to happen? It's recovering its value. Okay? It's recovering its value. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we've seen is that in the context of a first order delay like that, a context of this feedback, this negative feedback, we have stability in place. We have great stability in terms of resisting change. We impose a change, it pushes back against it. That's what negative feedbacks are all about. That's what regulatory feedbacks are all about. Securing stability even in the midst of disturbance. Bringing us back into balance. And that's the balance. Very simple thing if you think it through. If the stock increases above its equilibrium value, the outflow increases and it's brought down. If the stock decreases below its equilibrium value, the inflow is greater than the outflow, and it increases back to it's a very intuitive sort of balance with things. So we've seen this with our graph here. We've also seen accumulations, ladies and gentlemen. So what does this all mean in terms of the underlying concepts? I'm just going to spend a few minutes on it, and then we're going to turn to exercises. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go and talk about these underlying concepts. Okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to consider these stocks. What are these stocks? Well, these stocks are the current state of the system. Okay? Yes?
Okay, just one question.
Sure.
So when you draw the time slot,
Mm-hmm.
you put it above the quadrant
Yeah.
displays it. How did you make it to show on the run simulation?
Oh, okay, great question. Wonderful question, folks. And I stand remiss, or I sit remiss at least, here. So I put this up here. I could have put it down here, and that would have been simpler. But I put it up. How did I get to it? Let's show it, okay? Forgive me for my neglect. Okay, I right-clicked and I ran it, and then it doesn't show up. And what did I do? I did something tricky. I right-clicked on this, and I then dragged down. And I can drag it around as I want.
So
The panning. Do you remember for that very first example earlier today we had to enable that? By default it's enabled. So I can go see it. And that's a useful thing because sometimes you want to hide something from the normal view. You don't want to see it in the normal view, but maybe sometimes you want to go see it. And you can put it off the screen and out of sight, out of mind when you don't need it.
To grab it to pan?
I right-clicked okay, I need Mac consult. Paging Mac users. How do you do a right-click on the Mac?
You don't.
Okay.
It's you use
Two fingers.
Well, 2 fingers and drag. I think that's 2 fingers and drag will do. I think. Drag
Okay.
around the image.
Okay.
It's not panning when I do it.
Okay, so where's wind chill? Could you sum in the wind chill?
Yeah, it was before, but somehow.
Okay, wind chill? How do I pan on the Mac? How do I pan, drag around?
Right click.
Okay, how do you right click on a Mac?
It could be 2 fingers, or it could be holding options.
Or holding what?
Or holding options depends.
You can also do Option and drag?
It depends on the settings that how, but 2 fingers does also work. If try both of them. If you don't know, I can go and help.
Okay, wind chill stands ready. This is like
Neither
the,
one of those is working for me.
okay,
Where do we check off the can?
so if you'd like to pan, you could go click on this, and you can drag down, and you'll see down here there's an enable panning
On the simulation.
on the simulation. Yeah. Okay, who else needs TA help? Okay, so a clarification was just made. Winchell, could you make that clarification? What do they have to do? You have to click on it and then do 2 fingers?
Basically, you have two fingers press down and then drag.
And so 2 fingers, push it until it clicks and drag?
Yes.
Well, that sounds most uncomfortable. Okay. Okay. Other questions? So again, Mac, you put 2 fingers on it, you push down, and you drag.
You have to click down.
Okay. Okay. So, folks, we're gonna finish this up, but I wanna deal with this buzzing, glooming confusion. So, stocks here are the state of the system. The number of people who are currently normal glycemic, the number of people who are currently diabetic. That's the current state of the system. They lead to disequilibrium behavior. They lead to kind of getting the system back, sort of dealing with these transient things, like when we disturb it, it takes a while for it to recover, to sort of get back to equilibrium, because the stock is still out of whack. You change it from 500 to 600, it'll come back, but it remembers that disturbance for a certain amount of time. It sort of retains that memory. It's the state of the system. And it has this kind of inertia associated with it. It gives to delays till it's back into balance. Flows are critical to the change. These are where the change takes place. All stocks are changing because of flows. You notice that we specified one thing, ladies and gentlemen, and one thing only within the properties for each stock. What was that? The initial number of people in that stock. After that, how does it change after that? If we didn't tell it how to change, how does it know how to change? There's a rate. And let's go check what that rate is. So let's go look at normal glycemic here. And you'll notice this scary formula. The rate of change in normal glycemic, how fast it's going up or down, is given by incoming normal glycemic minus outgoing. So in other words, by the inflow minus the outflow. If the outflow is greater than the inflow, if we're going out faster than coming in, the rate of change of this will be negative. Thank you. It'll be going down, because this will be greater than that. This will be negative. That means this will be going down. The more out of balance it is, the more this is bigger than this. Where we're rushing out and nothing coming in, it'll be very negative, right? Changing down. By contrast, if it's rushing in faster than rushing out, like when we change this to 0, the stock to 0, we have lots rushing in, nothing going out. This will be very positive. It will come up quickly. Does that make sense? So this is the flows determine the stocks, ladies and gentlemen. Those flows that you put in a formula for 50 and for this guy times that guy. The values of those flows are what determine the values of the stocks. After the initial time, its value over time is given by the flows. So the flows are where the action's at. The flows are the verbs. They're always expressed as something per unit time. In general, it's hard to measure a flow, ladies and gentlemen. So the mighty South Saskatchewan River that you passed over on your way in today. Some of you walked over the bridge over it. That river, if we wanted to measure its flow, it's actually a lot harder than asking, okay, how much water is, say, in a lake at a given time. What we might do is sort of measure how quickly it fills up some unit of volume. In other words, we integrate it over time. We sort of accumulate it over time. It's hard to measure flows at an instant in time because it's something per unit time, per week. We can quantify flows. If we froze the system, froze it at an instant, we could count how many people are normal glycemic, how many people are diabetic. We couldn't count the value of the flow. That's sort of a rate of change. It's kind of like if you were to freeze time in your house while water is rushing into your bathtub, all you'd see is a thing of water frozen. You wouldn't be able to see how quickly it's coming in. Yes?
But the flow,
yes.
Precisely the quantity you're interested in an intervention, wouldn't that be the
totally
quantity that you're interested in? So then you have to be able to generate it.
Yes, what I'm trying to say is you can absolutely quantify it. You can absolutely quantify it. The point is that if you were to freeze time, this is a way of, at an intuitive level, trying to distinguish, is something a stock or a flow? If it's something that you can measure at an instant in time, not over time, but at an instant in time, then it's a stock, typically. If it's something that you need to express as something per unit time, it's typically a flow. This is kind of a heuristic that we use to distinguish between them. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the South Saskatchewan River's rate of flow can be quantified in cubic meters per second, or cubic feet per year, or what have you. We can absolutely quantify it. It's hard to measure at an instant. We measure it over some period of time, typically, and so it is with flows. Flows are a rate of change, and they tend to be hard to measure at a moment. So if we want to know the incident cases, for some infectious disease, we'll express as incident cases accumulated over the course of a week or over the course of a month. It's accumulated sort of over that time to quantify how fast people are developing the disease. Is that helpful? Okay. Okay, so in examples of flows might be, the inflow, outflow of a bathtub, rate of incident cases, rate of recovery, of mortality, of births. Rates, ladies and gentlemen, most rates, but not prevalence rate. Prevalence rate is I've heard it called an abomination by an epidemiologist. It's not a rate. Just like the exchange rate is not a rate. How many Canadian dollars there are per US dollar. That's not a rate. That's a ratio. Prevalence is a ratio, but it's not a rate. When we're talking about rates, we're generally talking about flows. Our spending rate, right? Power in terms of watts is a rate. So these are sort of examples of flows. Stocks might be something like stress, blood pressure, allostatic load. Those are kind of quantities we can measure at a given time. So this is kind of the interaction. Stocks determine flows. The current value of those stocks, ladies and gentlemen, the fact that we had stocks here, how many people are normal glycemic determine the value of the flow. Right there, right? Does it not? Determines it. But the value of the flows dictate the value of the stocks over the next little bit. The fact that we have lots of people leaving, more people leaving than coming in, the stock was going down over time. So you have this kind of dual relationship between stocks and flows. The stocks hold the state of the system, and the flows dictate the change in that state. The flows, and it was beautifully said here, and I couldn't agree more, the flows are where the action's at, the flows are where the interventions are at. We generally don't have the luxury of instantly changing the stocks, instantly changing the number of people with HIV. What we can do is help lower the rate at which people are getting infected by HIV, or lower the rate of death from HIV/AIDS, or we can help discover people with HIV earlier in the acute phase, and therefore make them diagnosed, and therefore allow better personal protective behavior to be exercised in their context. We're affecting the flows. In addition, in these models, we have auxiliary variables that are kind of convenience names for things like the total population or the prevalence of infection. These are sort of nice names for quantities that give us, say, the sum of this one plus this one plus this one, or the value of infectious divided by the total population. And we typically will put those into diagrams. Often associated with these diagrams are a set of feedbacks that we don't necessarily explicitly show, but which are very valuable to show where you can. I think I'm going to stop there with system dynamics models for today, but I wanted to give you a sense of this. I also had a subversive goal in mind of starting to get you familiar with some of the palette and introducing factors to be useful whatever type of modeling you do, and of getting you familiar with this convention where we can draw out causative diagrams, because I imagine that many of you may wish to show in your conceptual models for this afternoon, or that you may formalize after this afternoon's exercises, you may want to show causative diagrams created with any logic. Okay, so that's all I'm going to show right now. Be aware that we're going to be putting a big emphasis on hybrid models within this workshop. It is most emphatically no longer a matter of choosing your poison, choosing which method you want to use and committing to it, joining that community and remaining only in that community. This is the world now of pluralistic modeling. Some people have called it promiscuous modeling in a sentiment with which I most emphatically disagree. But it is a pluralist modeling environment where we can mix together context. So you may be planning to use system dynamics as your main modeling tool, and that's great. Hope this has some use, and we'll be going into a lot more detail for those sort of folks. You may wish to use elements of system dynamics within a person to capture things like stress levels and their evolution over time in the context of influences from social networks, in which case you may want to use a few stocks and flows, as in this picture depicted here and what Jeff showed, to capture continuous quantities which are varying over time in accordance with factors affecting stress, my weight, my level of immune cell activation, my level of risk perception. We may capture those in this sort of form to capture regulatory feedbacks, to capture factors that keep us in balance, to capture aspects of perception, and things that regulate our behavior. So within this context, don't think that this is not useful because you're not planning to use system dynamics as your main methodology. If that's the case, you may still want to weave these in, and very importantly, you will want to use elements of this causal loop diagramming in thinking through how certain variables relate to these factors here. Okay? So it has been a long session. We started with talking about regulation of hunger, and lunch is now far from our minds. Our bodies are back into balance, except for one need. We will now have a bio break, and we will then continue on with you fortified by that lunch and with this extra knowledge to our main quarry for the afternoon, which is no less than starting to explore your projects at a conceptual level, assisted with the able guidance of your TAs and the faculty mentors. So we're going to have a 10-minute break, and we will reassemble in this room and then disperse to the sub-rooms for which are going to be topically grouped. And I will announce these up on the board. Okay? Thank you very much. One thing, right? Yeah, it's tricky.